The law of demand expressed a relationship between the price and quantity demanded. There are other concepts that are related to demand, and in this presentation, I shall present to you the concepts of extension and contraction and increase and decrease of demand. Before I move in further, please share this video with your friends and subscribe to this channel. I hope the notes that you are getting on the slides are useful to you for your examination purposes. So we use the word shift and movement. Let us try and understand these words, how we can use to explain the concepts relating to demand. Now, movement on the demand curve is something that you have already understood. This movement along the demand curve indicates to the extension and contraction of demand. When we use the word extension and contraction of demand, we mean that the price is a major factor for causing that change. So price high, quantity demanded is small, and price is low, quantity demanded is high. In this particular case, what is happening is there is a movement that takes place along the same demand curve. And this happens only because of a change in price. Let us see how we explain this. In this particular case, you can see extension of demand means movement down the demand curve because there is a fall in the price, and contraction of demand is the other word. Contraction means there is a reduction in the quantity demanded, but both these are dependent upon the change in price. Now, there is another term here. We understand it as shift in the demand curve, or we also use the word increase and decrease of demand. In this particular case, the shift takes place. It could move to the right and it could move to the left, which means you will get a new demand curve. Now, can you think of this position? Why should we get a new demand curve? What can bring about a new demand curve? So the quantity demanded may change due to any other factor other than price. So price remaining the same, a new demand curve will emerge. Try drawing that. Why does that kind of a demand curve emerge? Why would a demand curve be shown to the right or a new demand curve to the left? There are several reasons that we attribute to it. One is the change in the price of the substitute good or change in the price of complementary goods. Substitute good are those goods which can perform the function or the role of the good in question to a large extent, but not perfect. There are no perfect substitutes, but to a large extent, the good can actually satisfy that work done by the earlier good. It could be like milk and juice. Well, they can be called as substitute to some extent, but then they are not perfect substitutes. Water and milk, they're not perfect substitutes. Juice and bottled drink, they are not perfect substitutes, but they are, to some large extent, they are substitutes. Now, the change in the price of complementary. What are these complementary goods? Complementary goods are also called as joint goods. Now, these joint goods are jointly demanded. That means one good is related to the demand of the other good. It could be car and petrol or bike and petrol. So in this particular case, the demand for petrol will change according to the demand for bike, or either way it could happen. So when commodities are related to each other and are jointly demanded, we call them as complementary goods. The other reason why this shift can take place is also because of change in income. When a consumer's income increases or decreases, the quantity demanded can increase or decrease. And that quantity demanded has increased or decreased has nothing to do with the price of the commodity itself. So these are factors which we had held constant earlier. These factors have undergone a change in the taste and preference of the consumers. We had assumed that the consumer will have a fixed taste and preference during the period of study. Now, if you relax that assumption, what we understand is that when the taste and preference of the consumer changes, even the price remaining the same, the consumer may buy more of it or may not buy more of it. He may buy less of it. So the taste of a commodity may change, or the fashion may change. If some particular fashion, kind of dress was in fashion for some time, then after that, even though the price has not risen, people may not buy that product anymore only because some other fashion has kept in. It could also be because of season. For example, the demand for ice cream may fall during winter months. It is not because the price of ice cream has fallen, but because the season has changed. So anything other than price, what we had held constant, when they undergo a change, we will find that the quantity demanded will either increase or it will decrease. Um, you can see this increase and decrease on the two panels. You can see D1 was the original demand curve, and then you get a new demand curve as D1. Now this increase to quantity OQ from OQ to OQ1 is not happening because of a change in price. Just observe the diagram. You will see that the price remains the same. Price remains at the same, but the quantity purchased has changed from OQ to OQ1. This has certainly happened because of some other external factor and not due to the price of the commodity. On the other hand, you can also see DD as the original curve, and there is a leftward shift of the curve, in the sense that you get a new demand curve D1, D2, which is again not the quantity purchased has decreased, not because of for a rise in the price, but because of some other factor which, like we have just explained. Now, let us also look at this concept here, kinds of demand. Now, one demand that we just studied was the price demand, where price determines the quantity of commodity that we are going to purchase. Now, there is another kind of demand which we call it as income demand. In the case of income demand, various quantities of the commodity is purchased at various income levels of the consumer. So now here the income is not held constant. We are now saying that when the income of the consumer changes, then the quantity purchased by the consumer will also undergo a change. So the increase in the quantity demanded in this particular case is a function of an increase in income or decrease in income, and not because of price. It's written as D as a function of income. This is the diagram, which is very simple. So on the vertical axis, instead of price, we have put income, and on the horizontal axis, we have put quantity. So as the price increases, as the income increases of the consumer, we also see that the quantity of the goods that are purchased by the consumer has also increased. There is something called as cross demand, and cross demand relates to the price of related change in the price of the related goods. I just explained to you substitute goods or complementary goods. That is what it is. And when the prices of the substitute or the complement changes, then the quantity demanded of that good will also change. So it is written as D is a function of price of related goods. What are substitute goods? In the case of substitute goods, examples of substitute goods I just shared with you. In the case of substitute goods, with the rise in the price of A, what happens to the quantity purchased of commodity B, which is its substitute? That's the question. So if the price of the commodity A has increased, then the quantity B that is demanded may change. So how shall we understand that? And it is assumed in this particular case, we are assuming that the income, taste, and preferences of the consumer do not change. If you want to understand the substitute goods, then we have to assume again that income, taste, and preferences of the consumer does not change, only substitute goods price has changed. And we will see a diagram for that. And you can think of complementary goods. In the case of complementary goods, they are jointly demanded, and if the price of A falls, then the quantity demanded of B will rise, or if the price of A rises, then the quantity demanded of B will fall. So you can see this in the diagram. Yeah. So in the two panels, we have A as substitutes. Now, what do we mean by substitute? I have already explained to you. On the vertical axis, we are showing the price of commodity A. When the price of commodity A increases, then what happens to the demand for its substitute good? So obviously, the demand for the substitute good B will increase if the price of A increases. So there is a positive relationship. Both are increasing, which means price of A rising, and therefore the quantity demanded of B also rising. The other panel has got complement goods, and in the case of complement good, we are having the price of commodity A on the vertical axis and commodity B on the horizontal axis. It is very clear, if the price of A rises, then the quantity purchased of commodity B will fall. If the price of A falls, then the complementary good B, there will be an increase in the demand for complementary good B. So this is how the two goods are associated. And you can understand these questions. As a consumer, are you observant about price changes of substitute and complementary goods? And because of the price changes of complementary goods or substitute goods, have you rearranged your purchases? Try and get some specific examples for those kind of a thing. And did the nature of the good in question make any change in the way you responded to the change in price? And are these responses similar to the concepts that you just learned? So you learned now that the movement on the demand curve, the shift in the demand curve, or the new demand curve, and then you saw the goods for complementary, the diagrams for complementary goods and substitute goods. Now, these are terms that are otherwise used in economics, and they are very generally used when we have to describe consumer behavior. So I hope this lesson has been useful to you. Please like this session and share the session with your friends, and also subscribe to the channel. So the next session will be on price mechanism. Now that we have completed the entire consumer behavior, we in terms of utility and in terms of consumers equilibrium, we now will move into understanding price mechanism.